Congratulations, you've just woken up as a Roman teenager. The bad news? Your entire day, hell, your entire life, depends on a lottery you had no control over, which family you were born into. Because whether you're stretching awake on silk-stuffed mattresses or scratching flea bites on a straw mat that smells like rotting turnips is going to determine everything that happens next. It's dawn in ancient Rome, roughly 118 CE, and the city is already stirring to life around you. But here's the thing. There's no gentle sunrise streaming through your window because, surprise, most Romans don't have windows. Not real ones, anyway. If you're lucky, you've got some oiled cloth or thin sheets of horn covering rectangular holes in the wall. If you're not lucky, well, you've got holes. Just holes. The first thing that hits you isn't the sight of morning, it's the sound. Rome never truly sleeps, but dawn brings its own particular symphony of chaos. Street vendors are already shouting their wares and voices hoarse from yesterday's work. Fresh bread, hot bread, echoes off narrow stone walls while somewhere nearby a blacksmith's hammer rings against metal in steady, relentless rhythm. Cartwheels creak and groan over uneven cobblestones because, unlike today's smooth asphalt, Roman streets are basically obstacle courses of loose stones, puddles of questionable liquid, and the occasional dead animal. But your morning experience depends entirely on one crucial factor. Are you waking up as Marcus, son of a wealthy senator, or as Gaius, whose father sells fish in the Forum, or as Titus, who doesn't have a father because he's property? Let's say you've hit the Roman jackpot and you're Marcus. Your day begins in what Romans call a domus. Think ancient mansion with a courtyard, marble everywhere, and enough rooms to house a small village. You're stretching awake on a bed that would make modern luxury hotels jealous. A wooden frame inlaid with ivory, mattresses stuffed with swan feathers, and sheets made from silk that traveled thousands of miles from China. The room smells like expensive oils, frankincense, myrrh, and rose water. Your personal slave, probably a Greek kid around your age who's smarter than you but will never be free, is already laying out your clothes for the day. The sounds reaching your ears are muffled by thick walls and distance. You hear the gentle trickle of water from the impluvium, the fancy pool in your house's central courtyard that catches rainwater. Maybe some birds chirping in the peristyle garden where your family grows actual decorative plants instead of, desperately trying to find something edible. Now let's crash back to reality and say you're Gaius, middle-class fish seller's son. You're waking up in rooms above your father's shop, and the first thing that hits you isn't the sound of trickling water. It's the smell of yesterday's fish mixed with the general urban perfume of sewage, cooking food, and wood smoke. Your bed is a simple wooden frame with a mattress stuffed with straw and maybe some wool if your family's had a good month. The sheets are rough linen that scratches against skin still soft from sleep. But here's where it gets interesting, and by interesting, I mean potentially fatal. If you're really unlucky and you're one of the thousands of teenagers living in Rome's insulae, you're about to experience what historians politely call challenging urban living conditions and what you'd call a daily fight not to die. An insula is basically an ancient Roman death trap disguised as an apartment building. Picture a 6-story wooden structure packed with families like sardines in a can, except the can is on fire half the time and the other half it's collapsing. You're waking up on the top floor because rent is cheaper the higher you go, which makes sense until you realize that means you're farthest from the exit when things go wrong. In an insulae, things go wrong constantly. Your bed is a straw mat on the floor that you share with your siblings, possibly some cousins, and definitely some rats. The rats aren't paying rent, but they're permanent residents anyway. The room smells like unwashed humans, old food, animal waste, and that special urban funk that comes from too many people living too close together with too little water for washing. The sounds waking you up aren't gentle water features. They're your neighbors fighting through thin walls, babies crying, someone having what sounds like violent intestinal distress in a shared latrine down the hall, and the ever-present fear-inducing creaks and groans of a building that's held together by prayers and the occasional wooden beam. But wait, there's more. If you're waking up as a slave, congratulations on experiencing the absolute bottom of Roman social hierarchy. You're not in a room at all. You're in whatever space your master has deemed adequate for storing human property. Maybe it's a corner of the kitchen where you sleep curled up next to the still warm ashes of yesterday's cooking fire. Maybe it's a small room you share with a dozen other slaves, packed in like cargo. The concept of privacy doesn't exist for you because, legally speaking, you're not a person. Your bedding situation makes the insuli look luxurious. You've got whatever scraps of cloth or straw you've managed to gather, and you're grateful for them. The air around you smells like smoke, sweat, and fear because that's what slave quarters smell like when human beings are treated like livestock. Now here's what's universal. Regardless of whether you're waking up in silk or straw, Roman mornings are cold. Really cold. There's no central heating unless you count the hypocaust system that only the super wealthy can afford, and even that doesn't work very well. So you're waking up in air that makes your breath visible, and your first conscious thought is probably about getting warm. If you're wealthy Marcus, slaves are already lighting braziers filled with charcoal to warm your rooms. The smell of burning charcoal mingles with expensive incense, creating an atmosphere that says, I have enough money to burn things for comfort. You'll probably head to your private bath suite, where heated water waits in marble basins, and frankincense-scented oil will be rubbed into your skin by servants who've been up for hours preparing for your comfort. If you're middle-class Gaius, you're wrapping a rough woolen cloak around your shoulders and heading downstairs to help your father prepare the day's fish display. The cold makes your joints ache, and you can see your breath as you move through rooms that barely stay warmer than the street outside. You'll warm up by working, lifting, carrying, moving, because physical activity is your heating system. And if you're slave Titus, you're already moving toward your first task of the day regardless of how cold you are. Because complaining about temperature is a luxury you literally cannot afford. You'll warm up by starting fires for other people, hauling water, or whatever backbreaking labor your master has planned. Your comfort isn't even a consideration. But here's the thing that connects all Roman teenagers, regardless of social class. You're all waking up in a world that's simultaneously more connected and more dangerous than anything we experience today. Rome is the center of an empire stretching from Britain to Egypt, bringing exotic goods, foods, and people to your doorstep. But it's also a place where a cut on your finger could kill you, where fires can destroy entire neighborhoods in hours, and where your social position determines literally everything about your life prospects. The sensory assault of Roman morning is unlike anything in the modern world. No coffee brewing. Instead, you smell fermented fish sauce, baking bread, burning charcoal, and human waste. No alarm clocks. Instead, roosters, street vendors, workshop hammers, and the general cacophony of a city where 1 million people are trying to survive without modern infrastructure. And as you lie there in those first moments of consciousness, feeling the rough scratch of wool or the smooth caress of silk, breathing air thick with smoke and possibility, you're about to step into a day that will be shaped entirely by circumstances beyond your control. Because in ancient Rome, being a teenager isn't about finding yourself or exploring your potential. It's about survival. Welcome to your Roman morning. So you've survived the wake-up call. Congratulations, you're officially conscious in ancient Rome, which means you've already beaten the odds of dying in your sleep from building collapse, fire, or mysterious fever. But now comes the next challenge. Breakfast. And here's where Roman society reveals its true nature, because nothing, absolutely nothing, exposes social hierarchy quite like the first meal of the day. Let's get one thing straight immediately. Roman breakfast isn't about grabbing a quick bite before rushing off to your day. It's a daily reminder of exactly where you stand in the cosmic order of things. Think of it as the universe's way of saying, good morning. Here's your social status, served on a platter. Or not served at all, depending on who you are. If you're still our wealthy Marcus, stretching in your silk-sheeted luxury, breakfast is about to become a performance of privilege that would make modern influencers weep with envy. You don't walk to breakfast. You glide through marble corridors where your footsteps echo off frescoed walls, depicting gods who apparently have nothing better to do than look fabulous while naked. The dining room you enter is called a triclinium, and it's designed to make everyone who sees it understand that your family has money. We're talking about a space with painted walls showing elaborate hunting scenes, marble floors inlaid with intricate mosaics, and furniture made from exotic woods imported from the far reaches of the empire. The morning light streams through the open roof of the atrium, catching the steam rising from heated pools and creating an atmosphere that screams, "We're so rich we heat water just for ambience." Your breakfast arrives on silver platters carried by slaves who've been awake since before dawn preparing this feast. And what a feast it is! Fresh bread. Not the coarse, gritty stuff that passes for food in the lower classes, but actual white bread made from wheat, so fine, it's basically ancient Roman cake. There's honey drizzled over everything because sugar doesn't exist yet, but honey is expensive enough to serve the same purpose of showing off wealth. The sensory experience is overwhelming in the best possible way. The bread is still warm from ovens tended by professional bakers who understand their craft. You can smell the yeast and the rich, nutty aroma of fresh wheat. There are eggs, not just chicken eggs, but sometimes peacock eggs because apparently regular eggs are for peasants. Fresh fruits that have traveled hundreds of miles, grapes from the best vineyards, figs that taste like concentrated sunshine, and olives cured in herbs and spices that cost more than most people's annual income. The drink accompanying this feast isn't water. It's mulsum, a mixture of wine and honey that gets you slightly drunk while technically counting as a morning beverage. Because nothing says, "I've made it in life," quite like being able to afford alcohol with breakfast. The cup you're drinking from is probably made of glass imported from Egypt or silver hammered by master craftsmen, and it feels substantial in your hands, a daily reminder that you literally hold wealth. But here's where we crash back to reality for most Roman teenagers. If you're a middle-class Gaius, son of the fish seller, your breakfast situation is about to become a lesson in making do with what you have. You're walking down wooden stairs that creak ominously under your feet, past walls that smell like yesterday's fish mixed with the general urban perfume of too many people living too close together. Your family's kitchen is basically a corner of the main room with a small brazier for heating food. There's no fancy triclinium here. You're eating standing up or sitting on a simple wooden stool while trying not to knock over the carefully stacked amphory containing your father's fish sauce inventory. The air is thick with wood smoke from the cooking fire, and everything has a faint fishy smell that never quite goes away when your family's livelihood involves dead aquatic creatures. Your breakfast is porridge, not the creamy, delicious oatmeal of modern breakfast dreams, but ancient Roman pulmentum, a thick gruel made from millet or barley that has the consistency of paste and roughly the same flavor profile as wet cardboard. If your family's having a good month, there might be some olive oil mixed in, which adds a bit of richness and prevents the porridge from actually cementing in your stomach. On special occasions, religious festivals, successful market days, you might get some cheese crumbled on top, which transforms the meal from barely edible to almost tolerable. The bread accompanying this feast of mediocrity is dark, coarse, and heavy. It's made from whatever grain your family can afford, which usually means barley flour mixed with things you'd rather not think about. Sawdust to bulk it up, ground legumes to stretch the actual grain, and sometimes, if the harvest was particularly bad, things like ground acorns or even clay. Yes, clay. Because apparently the Romans discovered that you can make bread go further by adding literal dirt, and desperate people will eat it anyway. The sensory experience of middle-class breakfast is, let's call it challenging. The porridge has that special texture that makes you wonder if food is supposed to require this much chewing. The bread crunches in ways that suggest some of those added ingredients might be small stones. Everything tastes vaguely of smoke, because that's what happens when you cook over wood fires that don't draw properly. And the drink? Water. Just water. If you're lucky, it's from a fountain that hasn't been contaminated by the latest batch of intestinal disease making its rounds through the neighborhood. But wait, there's still another level down in this hierarchy of hunger. If you're slave Titus, breakfast is whatever your master decides you deserve, which might be nothing at all. Slaves often got one meal a day, and it wasn't breakfast. You're working on an empty stomach that's cramping with hunger, performing physical labor that would challenge well-fed modern athletes, while running on literally nothing but whatever scraps you managed to save from yesterday. When slaves did get morning food, It was typically whatever couldn't be sold or served to free people. Stale bread that's gone hard enough to chip teeth. Porridge made from the cheapest grains available, often spoiled or moldy. Water that's been sitting in containers long enough to develop interesting colors and smells. The concept of fresh food doesn't apply to you because freshness is a luxury, and luxuries are for people, not property. The eating environment for slaves was whatever space was available after everyone else had been accommodated. Maybe you're crouched in the kitchen, gulping down food as quickly as possible before the next task. Maybe you're standing in a courtyard, eating with your hands because utensils are for humans with rights. The sensory experience is dominated by urgency and fear. Urgency to consume whatever nutrition you can get, and fear that someone might decide you don't deserve even this meager sustenance. But here's what's truly insidious about Roman breakfast hierarchy. It's not just about the food itself. It's about time, space, and dignity. Wealthy Romans can afford to spend hours over breakfast, reclining on couches while slaves anticipate their every need. They eat in beautiful spaces designed for leisure and comfort. They have conversations about philosophy and politics while picking at delicacies that cost more than most people earn in months. Middle-class Romans grab what they can while preparing for a day of work. They eat quickly, efficiently, with an eye on the tasks ahead. There's no leisure in their breakfast, but there's still dignity. They're eating in their own space, with their own family, making choices about their meal, even if those choices are limited. Slaves eat when permitted, what they're given where they're told. There's no choice, no dignity, no leisure. Breakfast becomes just another reminder of their powerlessness, another daily humiliation disguised as basic necessity. And here's the kicker. All of this happens within a few city blocks. While wealthy Marcus is savoring peacock eggs and honeyed wine in his marble triclinium, slave Titus is choking down moldy bread in a kitchen barely large enough to turn around in. The same Roman sun shines on both breakfasts, but they might as well be happening in different universes. The smells of these different breakfast worlds occasionally intermingle in Rome's narrow streets. The aroma of fresh bread from wealthy households drifts past the smoke of cheaper cooking fires. The sweet scent of honeyed wine mingles with the harsh smell of burning charcoal and fish sauce. It's a daily olfactory reminder that plenty exists alongside poverty, luxury beside desperation. As you finish whatever breakfast your birth lottery has provided, whether it's exotic delicacies or barely edible porridge or nothing at all, the Roman day stretches ahead with all its possibilities and dangers. Your stomach might be pleasantly full or growling with hunger, but either way, you're about to step into a world where your next meal is never guaranteed, where social status determines not just what you eat, but whether you eat. And trust me, compared to what comes next in your Roman day, breakfast was the easy part. So you've survived breakfast or the lack thereof. Your stomach is either pleasantly satisfied with peacock eggs and honeyed wine, grudgingly accepting porridge that could double as construction material, or completely empty and screaming for attention. But now comes the next daily ritual that will announce to every person you encounter exactly who you are in Roman society: getting dressed. And here's the thing about Roman clothing. It's not fashion, it's a uniform. Every piece of fabric wrapped around your teenage body is basically a walking billboard advertising your social status, your family's wealth, your legal rights, and your future prospects. Think of it as ancient Rome's version of a name tag, except instead of "Hello, my name is Marcus," it says, "Hello, my family owns half of Gaul, and I will probably become a senator." Or, "Hello, my father sells fish, and I might own a shop someday if I'm lucky." Or, "Hello, I'm property and have no legal right to exist as a human being." Let's start with our wealthy Marcus, because his morning dressing routine is about to become a masterclass in conspicuous consumption that would make modern luxury brands weep with envy. You're not getting dressed, you're being dressed by multiple slaves who have turned clothing into a performance art. First comes the tunica interior, the Roman equivalent of underwear, except it's made of linen so fine it's practically transparent. This isn't the rough, scratchy fabric that most Romans know. This is linen that's been woven by master craftsmen, bleached to perfect whiteness, and feels like silk against your skin. The sensory experience is immediate. Coolness, smoothness, the whisper of expensive fabric settling against your body. But the real show starts with the toga praetexta. Oh, the toga praetexta. This isn't just clothing. It's a wearable symbol of your privileged status as a freeborn Roman male under the age of adulthood. Picture 18 feet of the finest wool, so white it practically glows, with a purple stripe along the edge that announces to everyone within visual range that you're untouchable, protected, special. Here's what Hollywood never tells you about togas. They're incredibly difficult to put on correctly. This isn't like throwing on a bathrobe. This is an intricate process that requires skill, patience, and preferably multiple assistants who understand the complex mathematics of Roman drapery. Your slave, let's call him Alexios, a Greek who's better educated than most Roman citizens but will never be free, approaches you with the toga like he's handling a religious relic. The process begins with Alexios draping one end of the toga over your left shoulder, then wrapping the rest around your back, under your right arm, across your chest, and over your left shoulder again. But here's the crucial part. The draping has to be perfect. Too loose, and you look sloppy, which brings shame on your family. Too tight, and you can't move properly, which makes you look like an amateur. The folds have to fall just right, creating elegant lines that suggest both dignity and grace. The weight of the toga is immediately noticeable. We're talking about several pounds of wool draped around your body. The texture is luxurious but substantial. You can feel the quality in every fiber. The purple stripe catches the morning light, and you know that everyone who sees you will immediately understand that you're someone who matters. But here's where Roman clothing gets really interesting. And by interesting, I mean potentially deadly if you get it wrong. The toga praetexta isn't just fancy dress-up. It's a legal protection. That purple stripe means you're under the guardianship of the state, protected from physical and sexual assault by Roman law. Harm a boy wearing the toga praetexta, and you're not just committing a crime against an individual. You're offending the Roman state itself. Now let's crash back to reality with our middle-class Gaius. Your morning dressing routine is considerably simpler, faster, and less likely to require a team of assistants. You're putting on a tunic, just a tunic. Think of it as ancient Rome's equivalent of jeans and a t-shirt, except it's all one piece and made of wool that feels like it was woven by someone with a grudge against human skin. The tunic is knee-length, practical, and dyed in whatever color your family could afford. Probably brown or gray, because bright colors cost money, and money is for people who don't sell fish for a living. The fabric is coarse wool that's been woven by local craftsmen who prioritize durability over comfort. It scratches against your skin in a way that reminds you constantly that life is not meant to be comfortable. Over the tunic goes a cloak if the weather's cold. And here's where middle-class Roman fashion gets creative in the way that desperation breeds creativity. Maybe it's wool if your family's had a good year. Maybe it's a patchwork of different fabrics sewn together when times were tougher. The important thing is that it keeps you warm and doesn't completely fall apart during normal daily activities. Your footwear situation is similarly practical. Leather sandals if you're lucky, wooden clogs if you're not, bare feet if your family's having one of those months where every sestertius goes toward food instead of comfort. The sandals are locally made from whatever leather the cobbler could get his hands on, which means they smell like the animal they came from and probably still have some of the original hair attached. But even middle-class Romans get to participate in the toga experience, sort of, on special occasions, religious festivals, or when conducting official business. You might wear a plain white toga without the purple stripe. It's still complicated to put on, still expensive enough that your family owns exactly one, and still makes you feel important even if it's made from wool that's several steps down from Marcus's luxury model. The sensory experience of middle-class Roman dressing is all about practicality with occasional glimpses of aspiration. The rough wool against your skin reminds you that comfort is a luxury, but the weight of a toga on festival days makes you feel connected to Roman tradition and dignity. And then there's slave Titus, whose morning dressing routine can be summarized in one word: tunic. Just a tunic. One tunic, made from the cheapest fabric available, often undyed because dyes cost money and money isn't wasted on property. Your tunic is rough, shapeless, and designed for durability rather than appearance. It's probably made from wool so coarse it feels like wearing a hair shirt, or linen so rough it could be used as sandpaper. The color is whatever the cheapest dye produced, often a muddy brown or gray that hides stains because, let's face it, you're going to get dirty and no one's going to care. There's no ceremony to putting on slave clothing, no assistance, no careful draping, no consideration for how the fabric falls or how you look. You grab your tunic, pull it over your head, and get to work. The concept of fashion doesn't apply to you because fashion is for people, and legally speaking, you're not a person. But here's where Roman clothing reveals something truly sinister about the society. Even slaves wear togas. Sort of. When they're freed, if they're freed, they get to participate in a ceremony where they receive a toga and become Roman citizens. It's called manumission, and it's supposed to be this beautiful moment of transformation from property to person. Except here's the catch. The toga they receive is often a cheap, rough version that immediately marks them as former slaves. So even freedom comes with a dress code that reminds everyone of your previous status. Now, let's talk about hygiene, because Roman personal care practices are going to make you appreciate modern plumbing in ways you never thought possible. If you're wealthy, Marcus, your morning routine includes a visit to your private bath suite where slaves have prepared warm water scented with oils and herbs. You're not just getting clean, you're being transformed into a walking advertisement for your family's wealth. The oils rubbed into your skin cost more than most Romans earn a year. Rose oil from Persia, frankincense from Arabia, myrrh from Africa. Your body becomes a map of the Roman Empire's trade routes. The sensory experience is intoxicating. Warm oil massaged into your skin by expert hands. The scent of exotic flowers and spices creating an aura of luxury that follows you through your day. But if you're middle-class Gaius or slave Titus, your hygiene routine is considerably more basic. Cold water if you're lucky, no water if you're not. Maybe some olive oil to cut through the grime, but probably just soap made from animal fat and ash that removes dirt while taking a layer of skin with it. The smell situation in ancient Rome is something modern people literally cannot comprehend. Wealthy Romans smell like expensive perfumes and oils. Middle-class Romans smell like wool, smoke, and whatever they've been working with. Slaves smell like sweat, hard work, and fear. And everyone smells like the city itself. A mixture of cooking food, burning charcoal, human waste, and the indefinable scent of too many people living too close together. As you finish getting dressed, whether you're wrapped in silk and purple or scratching at ruffle, you're stepping into a world where your clothing tells everyone exactly how they should treat you. Your fabric speaks before you do, announces your status before you open your mouth, determines your opportunities before you take your first step. And here's the most Roman thing of all. Everyone accepts this. The clothing hierarchy isn't seen as unfair or oppressive. It's just the natural order of things. Your toga, or tunic, or lack thereof, is simply the universe's way of organizing society, as natural and unchangeable as the rising sun. But as you're about to discover, Roman society has even more creative ways to remind you of your place in the world. And they all involve what you do with your newly dressed body for the next 12 hours. So there you are, properly dressed according to your station in life, smelling either like exotic Persian roses or yesterday's fish sauce, standing at the threshold of what Romans optimistically call education. And here's where Roman society reveals just how creatively brutal it can be. Because if you thought the clothing hierarchy was harsh, wait until you see what passes for learning in the ancient world. The Roman approach to education can be summed up in one simple principle. If you've got money, you get wisdom. If you don't have money, you get whatever's left over. And if you're property, well, you get to watch other people learn while you serve them wine and pretend you can't understand every word they're saying. Let's start with our privileged Marcus, because his educational experience is about to make modern private schools look like bargain basement operations. You're not walking to school. You're being escorted by slaves to a series of private tutorials that cost more than most Roman families earn in a decade. Your first teacher is a grammaticus, probably a Greek slave who's more educated than 99% of the Roman Empire, but will never be free. Let's call him Apollodorus. He's at the kind of classical education that would make modern university professors weep with envy. Fluent in both Latin and Greek, versed in poetry, rhetoric, mathematics, and philosophy. And he's your personal property. The teaching space is your family's private library, a room that's basically pornography for book lovers. Scrolls everywhere, papyrus imported from Egypt at astronomical cost, covered in the works of Homer, Virgil, Cicero, and Aristotle. The smell is intoxicating if you're into that sort of thing. Aged papyrus, expensive ink, and the faint scent of cedar oil used to preserve the scrolls. The morning light streams through the atrium, creating perfect reading conditions that most Romans will never experience. Your learning materials are works of art. Wax tablets with ivory frames, styluses made from silver, ink that costs more per ounce than most people's monthly wages. When you make a mistake, you don't erase it. A slave does that for you. When you need a new scroll, someone just produces it. When you're thirsty, honeyed wine appears. Learning, for you, is a luxury experience. And what are you learning? Everything. Latin literature that teaches you to speak like a senator. Greek philosophy that trains you to think like a ruler. Rhetoric that prepares you to command audiences in the forum. Mathematics that helps you manage vast estates. History that shows you how your ancestors conquered the world. This isn't education. It's training for empire. The sensory experience is all about refinement and privilege. Apollodorus speaks in cultured tones, never raising his voice, explaining complex concepts with infinite patience because his life literally depends on your satisfaction. The stylus feels smooth in your hand as you practice writing on wax that's been perfectly prepared. The scrolls rustle with the sound of quality as you unroll texts that contain the wisdom of ages. But here's the thing about elite Roman education. It's not just about learning facts. It's about learning how to be superior to other people. Every lesson reinforces your position at the top of society. You study the great speeches of Cicero, not just to learn rhetoric, but to understand how words can control masses of people. You read military histories not just for knowledge, but to prepare for commanding armies. You practice philosophy not for wisdom, but to justify ruling over others. Now let's crash back down to earth with middle-class Gaius, whose educational experience is about to become a masterclass in making do with limited resources. You're walking through Rome's narrow streets to what Romans call a ludus, a basic school that's one step up from complete illiteracy and about 3 steps down from actual education. The walk itself is an education in urban survival. You're dodging carts, stepping around puddles of questionable origin, and trying not to inhale too deeply because Rome's air quality makes modern pollution look like mountain freshness. The sounds assault your ears, vendors shouting, workshops hammering, animals braying, and the general chaos of a million people trying to survive in a city built for maybe half that number. Your school is not a building. It's a space. Maybe a covered area in a public portico, maybe a rented room above a bakery, maybe just a corner of the forum where your teacher has laid claim to a few square feet of stone. The classroom smells like whatever's nearby. Bread if you're lucky, sewage if you're not, always the underlying scent of too many unwashed bodies in too small space. Your teacher is a freedman named Quintus who may or may not actually know how to read properly. He's charging fees that your family can barely afford for an education that's barely worthy of a name. But it's what you've got, so you make it work. The learning materials are a joke compared to Marcus's ivory and silver setup. You got a wax tablet, sure, but it's made from wood so rough, it gives you splinters and wax that's been reused so many times it's more gray than white. Your stylus is iron, not silver, and it's been sharpened so many times it's basically a needle that threatens to punch through the wax and into your hand. The sensory experience of plebeian education is all about discomfort and distraction. Quintus shouts to be heard over street noise, which means your lessons sound less like refined instruction and more like verbal combat. The wax tablet feels gritty under your stylus because it's been recycled countless times. Your back aches from hunching over in cramped conditions, and your eyes water from the smoke drifting in from nearby workshops. And what are you learning? The basics, if you're lucky. Reading, slowly, painfully, with frequent corrections delivered via wooden stick to various parts of your anatomy. Writing, simple words, simple concepts, nothing that might give you ideas above your station. Basic arithmetic that might help you not get cheated too badly in business transactions. Maybe some memorization of famous speeches, though you'll never understand the complex rhetorical techniques that make them effective. Here's where Roman education gets really brutal. Discipline. Quintus doesn't have the luxury of patience that Apollodorus shows Marcus. You make a mistake, you get hit. You ask too many questions, you get hit. You look like you're not paying attention, you get hit. Education for the middle class involve a lot of hitting. The classroom dynamic is pure chaos. 20 or 30 boys of various ages crammed into a space designed for maybe 10, all trying to learn over the noise of Roman street life. Some are your age, some are younger, some are older students who clearly aren't getting this any faster than you are. Everyone's frustrated, everyone's uncomfortable, and everyone's competing for the teacher's attention while simultaneously trying to avoid his stick. And then there's slave Titus, whose educational experience can be summed up in 2 words: not happening. Slaves don't go to school because slaves don't need to read. Except, and here's where Roman society shows its trademark inconsistency. Some slaves are more educated than their masters. If you're a Greek slave captured in war, you might have received an excellent education before being enslaved. If you're a house slave with useful skills, your master might actually pay for you to learn specialized knowledge that increases your value. If you're lucky enough to be chosen as a pedagogus, a slave who escorts and tutors wealthy children, you might pick up education through proximity. But if you're an ordinary slave, your education consists of learning whatever skills keep you alive and useful. How to light fires without burning down the house. How to prepare food without poisoning anyone important. How to anticipate your master's needs without being told. How to endure punishment without dying. How to accept brutality as normal. The irony is staggering. Slave Titus might be standing in the corner of Marcus's tutorial sessions, invisible and ignored, understanding every word of advanced Greek philosophy while legally being considered too stupid to learn. He might speak 3 languages fluently while being forbidden to read in any of them. He might have mathematical skills that surpass his master's while being valued primarily for his ability to carry heavy objects. But here's what really defines Roman education: gender. If you're a girl, congratulations. You've just discovered that your society considers education for females to be somewhere between unnecessary and dangerous. Wealthy girls might learn basic reading and writing from private tutors, but anything beyond that is considered inappropriate for your delicate feminine nature. Middle-class girls learn domestic skills from their mothers: spinning, weaving, food preparation, household management. This is considered their education, and society treats these skills as if they're somehow less valuable than learning to recite Greek poetry, even though they're actually more useful for daily survival. Slave girls learn whatever keeps them useful to their masters, which often includes skills that free women are considered too pure to possess. The contradiction is mind-bending. Slave women might be more capable and knowledgeable than free women, but they have no rights or legal recognition. The physical environment of Roman education varies wildly based on your social class, but there are some universal constants. It's loud. Rome is always loud. Street noise, workshop sounds, construction chaos, animal sounds, human voices, all of this penetrates every learning space except the most luxurious private libraries. It's uncomfortable. Roman furniture isn't designed for extended sitting. Even wealthy students experience physical discomfort during long lessons. For poorer students, cramped conditions and hard surfaces make learning a physical endurance test. It's hierarchical. Every educational setting reinforces social divisions. Wealthy students learn that they're destined to rule. Middle-class students learn that they're lucky to participate at all. Slaves learn that knowledge is a privilege they're borrowing, not a right they possess. And it's brutal. Physical punishment isn't an exception in Roman education. It's the standard method of instruction. Teachers beat students for mistakes, for inattention, for asking questions, for not asking questions, for existing while not being smart enough. Education hurts, literally. As you sit there in whatever educational environment your birth lottery has provided, marble library, crowded street school, or invisible observer status, you're absorbing more than just reading and writing. You're learning your place in the world, your limitations and possibilities, your value as a human being. The stylus in your hand, if you have one, carries the weight of your future. The words you're learning to read, if you're learning to read, will determine how you understand the world. The knowledge you're gaining, if you're gaining knowledge, will shape every decision you make for the rest of your life. But here's the thing about Roman education. It's not designed to make you happy or fulfilled or intellectually curious. It's designed to make you useful to the Roman state and compliant with Roman social order. And now that your morning education is complete, whether it involved mastering Aristotle or memorizing the alphabet or simply observing from the shadows, it's time to put that learning to work. Because in ancient Rome, education isn't about personal growth. It's about knowing your place and staying in it. So you've survived Roman education, whether that meant mastering the art of rhetoric in marble libraries, getting beaten with sticks while learning basic arithmetic, or watching other people learn while you stood invisibly in corners. But here's the thing about Roman society. Education isn't the end goal. It's job training. And now it's time to discover what Romans really think your teenage life is worth. Welcome to the Roman labor market, where your value as a human being gets translated into very specific, very brutal economic terms. If you thought the education system was a harsh reminder of social hierarchy, just wait until you see what Roman society expects you to do with your body for the next 50 years. Let's start with our privileged Marcus, because his work experience is about to make modern trust fund kids look like hardworking laborers. Your day job, if we can even call it that, consists mainly of learning how to manage an empire without actually doing anything that might cause you to break a sweat. You're not heading to an office or factory. You're gliding through the Forum Romanum, the beating heart of Roman political life, where the real work of empire happens. And by real work, I mean standing around looking important while other people do everything. The Forum is a sensory assault of marble, ambition, and barely controlled chaos. The morning air carries a mixture of expensive incense from nearby temples, the sweat of thousands of people conducting business, and that indefinable smell of power that seems to cling to important places. The sounds are equally overwhelming. Orators practicing speeches, merchants arguing over contracts, the steady clip of hooves on stone as officials arrive in litters carried by slaves. Your work involves shadowing your father or a family friend as they conduct the business of ruling the world. You're learning politics through osmosis, watching how senators manipulate public opinion, how contracts get negotiated, how justice gets dispensed or purchased. The physical labor involved in your education consists mainly of walking slowly while looking thoughtful and occasionally nodding at appropriate moments. But here's where Roman elite work gets interesting. It's actually incredibly demanding, just not in ways that involve your muscles. You're memorizing the names, histories, and political allegiances of hundreds of important families. You're learning to read people's expressions, to understand the subtle signals that indicate who's rising in power and who's about to fall. You're practicing the art of saying one thing while meaning another, of making promises you may or may not keep, of building alliances that might last decades or collapse overnight. The sensory experience of elite Roman work is all about refinement and calculated performance. Your toga feels heavier as the day progresses, several pounds of wool that must be kept perfectly draped despite hours of movement. Your feet, in expensive leather sandals, begin to ache from walking on marble floors designed to impress rather than comfort. Your throat gets dry from speaking in the measured, rhetorical tones that mark you as educated, but slaves appear with honeyed wine before you need to ask. And what's your compensation for this work? You're inheriting an empire. Your payment comes in the form of vast estates, political connections, and a legal right to own other human beings. Not bad for a day job that mainly involves looking distinguished in public. Now let's crash back to reality with middle-class Gaius, whose work experience is about to become a masterclass in the phrase, learning the hard way. You're not heading to the forum to discuss philosophy. You're walking to your father's fish stall to discover that the family business smells exactly as bad as you remember, except now it's your problem too. The sensory assault begins before you even reach the stall. Rome's markets are a symphony of commerce that would overwhelm modern shoppers. Vendors shouting prices and voices hoarse from yesterday's work, the squeal of cartwheels on stone, the lowing of cattle being driven to slaughter, and underneath it all, the specific smell of the fish market, a mixture of salt, scales, blood, and decomposition that you can taste in the back of your throat. Your workspace is a wooden stall about the size of a modern bathroom, packed with fish that arrived before dawn from the Mediterranean coast. The ice hasn't been invented yet, so preservation involves salt, prayers, and moving merchandise as quickly as possible before it becomes actively dangerous to consume. The floor is slippery with fish scales and questionable liquids. The wooden counters are stained with decades of fish blood and bare knife marks from countless cutting sessions. Your job description is simple. Do whatever needs doing. That means hauling baskets of fish that weigh more than you do, cleaning and gutting fish with knives sharp enough to remove fingers along with scales, shouting prices to customers in competition with every other vendor trying to sell similar products, calculating change in your head because mistakes come out of your family's profit margin, and doing all of this while maintaining the friendly demeanor that keeps customers coming back instead of going to the competitor 3 stalls down. The physical demands are immediate and relentless. Your hands, soft from your limited education, are about to become permanently perfumed with fish essence and decorated with an impressive collection of cuts from sharp knives and fish bones. Your back aches from lifting, carrying, and bending over the cutting board. Your feet hurt from standing on uneven stone floors. Your voice grows hoarse from shouting over market noise. But here's what's really challenging about middle-class Roman work. You're competing against everyone. The fish vendor next to you is selling similar products for similar prices. The customer haggling over your prices has limited money and unlimited options. Your family's livelihood depends on you being just slightly better, slightly faster, slightly more appealing than dozens of other people trying to make the same living. The sensory experience is exhausting in ways that go beyond physical labor. The constant noise means you develop headaches that throb in rhythm with the market's chaos. The smell penetrates your clothes, your hair, your skin. You'll smell like fish whether you're working or not. The visual assault of competing vendors, moving crowds, and bloodstained merchandise creates a kind of sensory overload that modern people rarely experience. And then there's slave Titus, whose work experience makes Gaius's fish selling look like a luxury vacation. Your job description can be summarized in 3 words: do everything demanded. And those demands never stop. Your workday begins before dawn because someone needs to light the fires, prepare the food, and get the household ready before your masters wake up. You're moving through dark corridors by feel, carrying materials that could seriously injure you if you trip, performing tasks that require skill and attention while being barely awake. The physical demands of slave labor are designed to extract maximum value from human property. You lift objects that strain your developing muscles. You carry loads that test your balance and endurance. You work in dangerous conditions, around open fires, with sharp tools, in unstable structures, because slave safety isn't a priority when slaves can be replaced. Your workplace is wherever you're needed, which could be anywhere from luxurious villas to dangerous construction sites. The sensory experience varies wildly depending on your assignment, but certain elements remain constant. Exhaustion, fear, and the hypervigilance that comes from knowing that any mistake could result in brutal punishment. Here's what's particularly insidious about slave labor. You might be more skilled than the people you serve. Slave Titus might be a better mathematician than Marcus, a more talented artist than his master, a more capable administrator than the officials he assists. But those skills are property, not personal assets. Your intelligence belongs to your owner. Your talents generate profit for someone else. Your capabilities are resources to be exploited rather than abilities to be developed. The compensation structure for slave labor is particularly brutal. You get whatever keeps you alive and productive. Food sufficient to prevent starvation, but not enough for comfort. Shelter adequate to protect your owner's investment, but not dignified enough to suggest you're human. Clothing functional enough to prevent scandals, but worn enough to remind everyone of your status. But Roman labor varies dramatically based on location as well as social class. Rural work follows seasonal rhythms that urban Romans barely understand. If you're a farm teenager, your year revolves around planting, growing, harvesting, and surviving. Spring work involves preparing fields, sowing seeds, and praying to agricultural gods for favorable weather. The physical demands include guiding plows behind oxen, feeling the resistance of earth breaking under metal shares, developing the rhythm of agricultural work that connects you to thousands of years of farming tradition. Summer brings cultivation, pest management, and the constant anxiety of watching weather patterns that could destroy months of work in a single storm. You're working under Mediterranean sun that can be literally dangerous, developing the kind of tan that marks you as someone who works outdoors, building the muscle and endurance that comes from repetitive physical labor. Autumn harvest is the most demanding time. Long days of cutting grain, gathering crops, and racing against weather changes that could ruin everything. Your hands develop permanent calluses from handling tools and crops. Your back strengthens and aches from constant bending and lifting. Your understanding of time becomes tied to natural cycles rather than human schedules. Winter provides relative rest, but also preparation for the next cycle. Tool maintenance, equipment repair, food preservation, and planning for spring create a different kind of work rhythm. Less physically demanding, but requiring different skills and knowledge. The sensory experience of rural labor connects you to natural cycles in ways that urban Romans never experience. You smell earth, growing plants, ripe grain, and the clean scent of wind across open fields. You hear birds, insects, wind, and the sounds of farm animals rather than constant human noise. You feel weather changes in your body, develop an intuitive understanding of seasonal patterns, and learn to read natural signs that predict climate changes. But here's what unites all Roman teenage labor, regardless of social class or location. It's preparing you for your adult role in society. Marcus's political training prepares him to rule. Gaius's market experience prepares him for commerce. Titus's slave labor prepares him for a lifetime of exploitation. Rural teenagers develop skills that feed the empire. The work you do as a Roman teenager isn't just about earning money or learning skills. It's about accepting your place in society and internalizing the values that keep Roman civilization functioning. Every task you perform, every skill you develop, every relationship you build through work is shaping you into the adult Roman society needs you to become. And here's the most Roman thing of all. Everyone accepts this as natural and inevitable. The idea that people might choose their own careers, develop their own talents, or pursue their own interests is literally incomprehensible. Work isn't self-expression or personal fulfillment. It's social obligation and economic necessity. As the Roman workday progresses and your teenage body adapts to whatever demands your birth lottery has placed on it, you're becoming more than just a worker. You're becoming a functioning part of the Roman machine, a cog in the empire that rules the Mediterranean world. But even the most demanding workday must eventually end. And when it does, Romans have their own unique ways of celebrating, worshiping, and reminding themselves that life is more than just labor. Although, as you're about to discover, even Roman leisure comes with its own particular forms of brutality. So you've survived another day of Roman labor, whether that involved discussing empire management while reclining on marble benches, gutting fish until your hands cramped, or hauling stone blocks while praying your back doesn't give out. Your teenage body is exhausted. Your social position has been reinforced through 8 hours of appropriate work, and you're probably wondering if this is really what life is supposed to feel like. Well, here's some good news and some bad news. The good news is that Romans believe the gods are actively involved in daily life, which means divine intervention might improve your circumstances. The bad news is that Roman gods are basically cosmic versions of Roman humans. Petty, violent, easily offended, and absolutely obsessed with proper protocol. Welcome to Roman religion, where every day is a delicate dance between appeasing supernatural forces and avoiding accidentally triggering divine wrath through improper ritual performance. Think of it as ancient Rome's version of walking through a minefield, except the mines are invisible, the rules change constantly, and stepping wrong doesn't just kill you, it potentially dooms your entire family for generations. Let's start with the religious experience that connects all Romans regardless of social class: household worship. Even if you're slave Titus with no legal rights, you're still expected to participate in daily rituals honoring your master's household gods. Because apparently even divine worship follows Roman social hierarchy. Your day began with these gods, and it's going to end with them too. The Laras and Penates, household spirits who supposedly protect your family and ensure domestic prosperity, live in a small shrine called a lararium that's positioned prominently in your home. If you're wealthy, Marcus, this shrine is a work of art. Marble or bronze figures, expensive incense, silver offering vessels, fresh flowers replaced daily by slaves who understand the cosmic importance of proper presentation. The evening ritual begins as shadows lengthen and oil lamps flicker to life throughout the house. The smell of burning olive oil mixes with frankincense and myrrh as your family gathers around the lararium. Your father, as paterfamilias, leads the ceremony with the gravity of someone who genuinely believes that household peace depends on keeping supernatural entities happy. The sensory experience is deliberately overwhelming. The sweet smoke of expensive incense burns your nostrils in a pleasant way. The flickering lamplight creates dancing shadows on painted walls, and your voice joins with your family's in ancient prayers that your great-great-grandfather recited in this same space. You're offering portions of your evening meal to gods who may or may not exist, but definitely receive better food than most Romans eat. But if you're middle-class Gaius, your household shrine reflects your family's more modest circumstances. The Laras might be simple clay figures made by local craftsmen. The incense is frankincense cut with cheaper resins that smell pleasant but don't cost a fortune. The offering vessels are bronze or even pottery rather than silver. But the devotion is just as genuine, the rituals just as carefully performed, because divine favor doesn't discriminate based on budget. The evening prayer still fills your modest rooms with smoke and whispered supplications. Your fish-stained hands hold frankincense that costs a day's profits, because some things are more important than immediate economic concerns. Your voice joins your families in prayers that acknowledge divine protection for the small business that keeps you fed and housed. And if you're slave Titus, you participate in household worship while being reminded that even your relationship with the gods belongs to someone else. You stand at the edges of family rituals, invisible and essential, helping prepare offerings you'll never receive, honoring gods who protect masters but ignore property. But household worship is just the beginning of Roman religious life. The real action happens during public festivals, and Romans have perfected the art of combining religious devotion with spectacular entertainment that makes modern events look like quiet meditation sessions. Take Saturnalia, which begins in December and basically turns Roman society upside down for a week. If you think modern holidays are chaotic, imagine a celebration where slaves temporarily become masters, masters serve slaves, gambling is encouraged, and public drunkenness is considered religiously appropriate behavior. The sensory assault begins days before the festival officially starts. The smell of roasting meat drifts through streets as families prepare for feasts that will bankrupt them for months. Workshop sounds change as craftsmen rush to finish Saturnalia gifts. Toys, candles, small statues, anything that could be exchanged during the gift-giving frenzy that makes modern Christmas shopping look restrained. When Saturnalia begins, Rome becomes a different city. The usual social hierarchy doesn't just relax, it reverses. Slave Titus gets to recline at dinner while Marcus serves him wine. Middle-class Gaius can gamble openly in the Forum without legal consequences. Wealthy patricians wear casual clothing and mix with plebeians in ways that would be scandalous during normal times. The sounds of Saturnalia are unlike anything Romans experience during the rest of the year. Instead of the usual marketplace chaos, you hear laughter, singing, the rattle of dice, and conversations between people who normally wouldn't acknowledge each other's existence. The visual spectacle is equally dramatic. Romans wearing colorful caps, carrying lit candles through streets, exchanging gifts in massive public ceremonies that transform the Forum into something resembling a carnival. But here's what makes Saturnalia particularly Roman. Even temporary social reversal follows rules. Slaves can command masters, but only during designated hours. Social mixing is encouraged, but everyone understands this is temporary. Religious devotion to Saturn requires breaking social norms, but those norms will be firmly re-established when the festival ends. Or consider Lupercalia in February, which combines religious devotion with public spectacle in ways that would make modern event planners faint. Young Roman men, including teenagers like Marcus, strip nearly naked, cover themselves in goat's blood, and run through the streets of Rome, striking women with leather thongs cut from sacrificed goats. The sensory experience is primal and overwhelming. The smell of blood and sacrifice fills the air around the Lupercal cave where the ritual begins. The sound of hundreds of young men shouting and running echoes off stone buildings. The sight of blood-covered bodies moving through crowds creates a visual spectacle that's part religious ceremony, part athletic competition, part fertility ritual. But here's the Roman twist. Women actually want to be struck by these blood-covered runners because the ritual supposedly promotes fertility and easy childbirth. So Lupercalia becomes this bizarre scene where young men chase women through streets while crowds cheer and religious authorities solemnly pronounce divine approval for behavior that would be considered assault during any other time of year. The physical sensation of participating in Lupercalia, if you're male and old enough, includes the weight of goat's blood on your skin, the burn in your lungs from running through Rome's narrow streets, the impact of leather against flesh, and the crowd's energy that transforms individual participants in a part of a larger religious experience. And then there's the Floralia in late April and early May, honoring the goddess Flora with celebrations that make modern spring break look like a church service. This is Roman religion at its most sensual and excessive. Theatrical performances featuring nudity, prostitutes working openly throughout the city, and public behavior that's normally forbidden suddenly becoming religiously mandated. The sensory overload of Floralia includes the sight of flowers everywhere, garlands decorating buildings, petals scattered in streets, floral crowns worn by participants who range from respectable citizens to professional entertainers. The smell of thousands of flowers mingles with perfumes, wine, and the general scent of a city celebrating with abandon. But Roman religion isn't all festivals and public spectacle. Daily religious observance includes a complex web of superstitions, omens, and ritual requirements that make modern life look refreshingly simple. Romans believe that divine will manifest through bird flight patterns, lightning strikes, animal behavior, and unusual natural phenomena. Your teenage brain is constantly processing environmental signs for religious significance. See a raven flying left to right? That might be a good omen, unless it caws 3 times, in which case you should probably postpone whatever you were planning. Notice unusual cloud formations? The gods might be trying to communicate. Here, thunder on a clear day? Someone has definitely offended Jupiter, and you should probably stay indoors until divine anger passes. The psychological impact of living in a world where supernatural forces constantly intervene in daily affairs creates a particular form of anxiety that modern people rarely experience. Every decision requires consideration of potential divine approval or disapproval. Every unusual event demands religious interpretation. Every success or failure reflects your relationship with cosmic forces beyond human understanding. But here's where Roman religion reveals its political nature. Religious authority belongs to the state, not to individual conscience. The Pontifices Maximus, the chief priest, is also a political position. Religious festivals serve state purposes as much as divine ones. Public religious spectacles reinforce social hierarchy while temporarily suspending it. Your participation in religious life as a Roman teenager isn't about personal spiritual development or individual relationship with divinity. It's about demonstrating proper civic behavior, reinforcing social bonds, and maintaining the cosmic order that keeps Roman civilization functioning. The coming-of-age religious ceremonies that mark your transition from child to adult reflect these political dimensions of Roman religion. When Marcus undergoes the toga virilis ceremony, he's not just changing clothes. He's being formally inducted into the religious community that maintains Roman power. The ceremony begins at dawn with household sacrifices to family gods, continues with public processions to major temples, and concludes with community feasts that celebrate the addition of a new adult citizen. The sensory experience includes the weight of incense smoke, the sound of religious chanting, the sight of temple architecture designed to inspire awe, and the taste of sacrificial meat shared in communion with gods and community. But the religious ceremony also includes darker elements that remind participants of divine power and human vulnerability. Sacrificial animals die publicly and dramatically. Blood flows visibly and abundantly. Priests examine entrails for omens that might reveal divine approval or disapproval of a new citizen. As evening settles over Rome and you prepare for sleep, whether in silk-draped luxury or on straw mats that smell like previous occupants, your day ends where it began, with religious observance that connects you to cosmic forces and community obligations. The oil lamps guttering in household shrines cast dancing shadows that seem to bring divine statues to life. The last prayers of the day mingle with distant sounds of a city that never completely sleeps. The smoke of evening incense carries your supplications to gods who may be listening, may be absent, or may be planning divine interventions that will transform tomorrow into something completely different from today. Your teenage brain, exhausted from navigating social hierarchy, physical labor, and religious obligation, finally gets permission to rest. But even sleep in ancient Rome comes with religious dimensions. Dreams are divine communications. Nightmares are supernatural warnings, and the boundary between waking and sleeping consciousness is just another space where gods might choose to intervene. Tomorrow will bring new religious obligations, fresh opportunities to offend divine sensibilities, and additional chances to participate in the cosmic drama that Romans believe determines human fate. But for now, surrounded by household gods and family obligations, you're falling asleep in a world where supernatural forces care deeply about your behavior, your choices, and your willingness to honor divine authority through proper ritual observance. Sweet dreams, young Roman. Try not to accidentally blaspheme in your sleep. So you've completed your religious obligations, appeased the household gods with proper incense and prayers, and managed to avoid accidentally blaspheming while unconscious. Congratulations, you've survived another day in the Roman cosmic order without triggering divine wrath. But here's the thing about Roman society. Even leisure time is designed to remind you exactly where you stand in the hierarchy. Except now, that reminder comes with blood, screaming crowds, and enough sensory overload to make modern concerts look like quiet meditation sessions. Welcome to Roman entertainment, where the government has perfected the art of keeping 1 million potentially rebellious citizens happy through carefully orchestrated spectacles that make modern sports events look like church services. The Romans invented the phrase bread and circuses for a reason. Keep people fed and entertained, and they won't notice that their lives are brutal, short, and completely controlled by forces beyond their comprehension. But here's where Roman entertainment gets interesting. Your social class doesn't just determine what you watch. It determines how you watch, where you sit, who you sit with, and whether you're more likely to cheer for the action or become part of it. Let's start with the crown jewel of Roman entertainment, the Flavian Amphitheater, better known to history as the Colosseum. If you think modern stadiums are impressive, imagine a 4-story stone building that seats 50,000 people, features a retractable roof system, underground mechanical lifts that could deliver exotic animals or elaborate stage sets, and plumbing sophisticated enough to flood the entire arena for naval battle reenactments. Walking toward the Colosseum on a day of games, you're hit with the sensory assault before you even reach the building. The sound carries for blocks, 50,000 people cheering, screaming, and reacting to spectacles you can't yet see. The air around the amphitheater smells like dust, sweat, blood, and that indefinable scent of crowd excitement mixed with fear. Street vendors hawk snacks, souvenirs, and small amphorae of wine to spectators streaming toward the entrances. But here's where your Roman birth lottery determines everything about your experience. If you're wealthy Marcus, you're entering through special passages that lead directly to the marble seats of the IMA Cavea, the prime real estate closest to the action. Your seat is cushioned, your view is perfect, and slaves appear with refreshments before you realize you're thirsty. The sensory experience of elite seating is all about comfort and superiority. You're close enough to see the gladiators' expressions, to smell the blood and sand, to hear the specific sounds of metal striking flesh. But you're also protected by barriers, shaded by awnings, and surrounded by other wealthy Romans who understand proper spectator etiquette. If you're middle-class Gaius, you're climbing stone steps to the Media Cavea, decent seats with reasonable views, but you're carrying your own snacks and sitting on bare stone that's going to make your backside numb within an hour. The crowd around you is louder, more boisterous, and more likely to throw things at performers who disappoint them. And if you're slave Titus, well, congratulations, you might actually be in the arena. Because someone has to die for the entertainment of free Romans, and slaves are expendable in ways that make modern labor protections look like luxurious working conditions. The games begin with a parade that's designed to overwhelm the senses and reinforce Roman power. Musicians play instruments you feel in your chest as much as hear with your ears. Exotic animals from Africa parade past in cages. Lions, tigers, leopards, elephants, creating a visual spectacle that reminds everyone of Rome's global reach. Gladiators march in formation, their armor gleaming in afternoon sunlight, their weapons sharp enough to glitter with reflected light. But the real entertainment begins with the beast hunts. Imagine watching professional hunters armed with spears and nets facing off against lions, bears, or leopards in an arena designed to provide maximum spectacle with minimum escape routes. The sounds are primal and terrifying. Animal roars, human screams, the clash of metal against claw, and the crowd's roar that drowns out individual voices. The smell of blood begins to permeate the arena as the body count rises. Sand is raked constantly to absorb blood and provide footing for the next act, but the iron scent of spilled life hangs in the air like incense at a particularly violent religious ceremony. And then come the gladiatorial combats, the main event that draws crowds from across the empire. These aren't just random fights to the death. They're carefully choreographed spectacles featuring different fighting styles, weapons, and dramatic scenarios designed to create maximum entertainment value from human suffering. The gladiators themselves are a mixture of condemned criminals, prisoners of war, and volunteers who've chosen this lifestyle because death in the arena offers more dignity than slow starvation in the slums. They're trained by professional schools, fed better than most Romans, and given medical care that would make civilian healthcare look primitive, right up until the moment they die for public amusement. The sensory assault of gladiatorial combat is unlike anything in the modern world. The clash of metal on metal rings across the arena. The crowd's roar shifts from excitement to bloodlust to disappointment, depending on the action's quality. You can smell the gladiators' sweat, the leather of their armor, the blood pooling in sand that's been raked and re-raked throughout the afternoon. But here's what makes gladiatorial games particularly Roman. The crowd participates in deciding who lives and dies. When a gladiator falls, the crowd signals thumbs up or down to indicate whether the victor should deliver the killing blow. You're not just watching violence, you're complicit in it, part of a collective decision-making process that treats human life as entertainment. The psychological impact varies wildly based on your position in Roman society. Wealthy spectators see gladiatorial death as confirmation of their superiority. They're civilized enough to watch rather than participate, powerful enough to decide fates with hand gestures. Middle-class spectators experience vicarious excitement, imagining themselves as successful gladiators while knowing they'll probably never face such tests. Slaves understand that they're watching their potential future, that arena death might be the only escape from lives of exploitation. But the Colosseum isn't the only venue for Roman entertainment that combines spectacle with social control. The Circus Maximus offers a different kind of sensory overload through chariot racing that makes modern motorsports look like leisurely drives through the countryside. Picture a track that seats 250,000 people, a quarter of Rome's entire population, watching teams of horses pulling chariots around a course designed to maximize crashes, injuries, and dramatic reversals of fortune. The noise is literally deafening. 250,000 voices cheering for racing factions with religious devotion, horses thundering around the track, wheels crashing when chariots collide, and the general chaos of the largest sporting event in human history. The chariot races create their own unique sensory experience. The track kicks up clouds of dust that coat spectators in a fine layer of grit. The smell of horse sweat and leather mingles with food vendors' offerings and human excitement. The visual spectacle includes not just the racing itself, but the elaborate pre-race ceremonies, the colorful team uniforms, and the imperial box where the emperor himself might appear to signal the start of races. Roman teenagers become fanatical supporters of racing factions, the reds, greens, blues, and whites, with loyalty that transcends social class. Wealthy Marcus might cheer for the same team as slave Titus, creating temporary bonds across social divisions that disappear the moment they leave the Circus Maximus. But even chariot racing reinforces Roman hierarchy. The best seats go to the wealthy, who can afford cushions and shade. The cheapest seats are standing room in blazing sun or cold wind, depending on season. The racing teams themselves are owned by wealthy investors who profit from successful drivers while accepting no risk themselves. For a different kind of entertainment, Romans can attend theatrical performances that combine Greek dramatic traditions with Roman sensibilities about appropriate public behavior. The theaters themselves are architectural marvels, semicircular stone structures with perfect acoustics that allow actors to be heard by audiences of thousands without artificial amplification. But Roman theater reflects the same social stratification as other entertainment. Wealthy patrons sit in comfortable front row seats with perfect sight lines and acoustic advantages. Middle-class spectators occupy mid-level seating with decent views and reasonable comfort. Slaves and poor free Romans crowd into upper-level seating where they can barely see the action but can at least participate in Rome's cultural life. The performances themselves range from Greek tragedies adapted for Roman audiences to contemporary comedies that mock social conventions while carefully avoiding anything that might actually challenge Roman authority. The sensory experience includes elaborate costumes, painted masks that amplify actors' voices, and staging effects that create convincing illusions of storms, battles, or divine interventions. But perhaps the most uniquely Roman entertainment venue is the public bathhouse, where social interaction and physical pleasure combine in ways that would make modern spa experiences look austere. Roman baths aren't just about getting clean. They're social centers where Romans of all classes interact, conduct business, and engage in elaborate rituals of pleasure and display. The sensory experience of Roman baths begins before you enter the building. You can hear voices echoing off marble walls, the splash of water in various pools, and the general sound of hundreds of people enjoying themselves. The air carries steam scented with exotic oils, the clean smell of hot water, and occasionally the aroma of food from vendors serving bathgoers. Inside, the temperature progression from cold to hot creates a physical experience unlike anything in modern life. You begin in the Frigidarium, a cold pool that shocks your system and supposedly provides health benefits through thermal contrast. The water is genuinely cold, often fed by mountain springs, and the marble pool sides feel smooth and substantial under your hands. Moving to the Tepidarium, the warm room that prepares your body for more extreme heat, you experience a gradual temperature increase that relaxes muscles and opens pores. The air becomes humid and comforting, and conversations echo off domed ceilings designed to create perfect acoustics for social interaction. The Caldarium, the hot room, provides the full sensory assault of Roman bathing culture. The air is hot enough to make breathing require conscious effort. The water is heated by sophisticated hypocaust systems that circulate hot air through walls and floors. Steam rises from pools in ways that make the room feel otherworldly, and the heat penetrates your body until you understand why Romans consider bathing a form of purification that's both physical and spiritual. But even in the baths, social hierarchy persists. Wealthy Romans can afford private bathing chambers, expensive oils, and professional massage services. Middle-class Romans share public pools but can still enjoy most amenities. Slaves attend masters in the baths, providing services while being excluded from full participation in bathing culture. The psychological impact of Roman entertainment reveals something crucial about the society. Spectacle serves political purposes as much as providing pleasure. Gladiatorial games remind citizens that Roman power extends over life and death. Chariot races channel competitive energy into harmless rivalry between racing factions. Theater reinforces cultural values while providing controlled outlets for social criticism. Baths create spaces where social mixing occurs within carefully maintained hierarchical boundaries. As evening approaches and the day's entertainment concludes, Romans stream out of amphitheaters, circuses, theaters, and baths with sensory memories that will linger for days. The smell of blood and sand, the sound of crowds cheering, the feeling of hot bath water, the sight of spectacular violence and athletic achievement. All of these experiences reinforce Roman identity while reminding everyone of their place in society. Your teenage brain, overwhelmed by sensory input and social complexity, processes entertainment experiences that are simultaneously thrilling and terrifying, beautiful and brutal, inclusive and hierarchical. Roman entertainment doesn't just provide escape from daily reality. It amplifies that reality, making social divisions more visible while temporarily suspending them. And as you walk home through streets still buzzing with post-spectacle energy, discussing the day's highlights with friends and family, you're participating in the social bonding that makes Roman entertainment politically effective. The games have given you shared experiences, common reference points, and collective memories that bind you to Roman civilization even as they remind you of your subordinate position within it. Tomorrow will bring new entertainments, fresh spectacles, and additional opportunities to experience the peculiar Roman combination of pleasure and brutality that defines leisure in the ancient world. But tonight, as the sounds of celebration fade and the city settles into its nighttime rhythms, you're falling asleep with sensory memories of a day when entertainment meant watching people die, cheering for horse-drawn vehicles careening around dangerous tracks, and soaking in heated pools while conducting the business of civilization. Welcome to Roman leisure. Try not to dream about the arena. So you've survived another day of Roman spectacle. Your ears are still ringing from 50,000 people screaming for blood. Your nostrils still carry the scent of arena sand mixed with human suffering. And your brain is still processing the cognitive dissonance of watching people die for entertainment while eating snacks. But here's where Roman society reveals its most intimate brutalities. Even love follows the same hierarchical rules as everything else. Welcome to Roman romance, where your heart's desires matter about as much as a gladiator's preference for which weapon kills him. Because in ancient Rome, Love isn't about finding your soulmate or exploring emotional connections. It's about strategic family alliances, property transfers, and ensuring that the right bloodlines produce the next generation of Roman citizens. Think of it as ancient Rome's version of a business merger, except the merchandise being traded is your body, your future, and your reproductive capacity. But before we dive into the cheerful world of arranged marriages and teenage pregnancy, let's establish something crucial. Roman attitudes toward love and sexuality would make modern relationship counselors weep with despair. Romans distinguish between amor, love, which is seen as a dangerous emotional weakness, and marriage, which is a practical arrangement designed to benefit families rather than individuals. If you're our wealthy Marcus, approaching your 16th birthday, your romantic future has already been decided by negotiations between your father and other patrician families looking to strengthen political alliances. You don't get to fall in love. Love happens to you, if at all, after marriage contracts have been signed and dowries exchanged. The process begins in rooms you're not allowed to enter, during conversations you're not permitted to hear. Your father and his peers discuss your marriageability like they're evaluating livestock, your health, your family's political connections, your potential inheritance, and your demonstrated ability to produce male heirs. Romance doesn't factor into these calculations any more than it would in purchasing a good horse. The sensory experience of elite Roman courtship is carefully orchestrated and completely artificial. When you're finally allowed to meet your future bride, let's call her Claudia, the encounter happens in formal settings designed to prevent any actual emotional connection. You sit in your family's atrium under the watchful eyes of both sets of parents, making stilted conversation about topics deemed appropriate for unmarried young people. Claudia herself is probably 12 or 13 years old, which means she's barely past childhood while you're approaching what Romans consider full adulthood. The age difference isn't accidental. It's designed to ensure that she'll be malleable, fertile, and completely dependent on your family for everything from social status to basic survival. The visual impact of meeting your future wife is carefully managed to emphasize her family's wealth and her potential as a breeding partner. She's dressed in expensive fabrics that cost more than most Romans earn in years. Her hair is elaborately styled by slave beauticians, and her jewelry announces her family's ability to provide a substantial dowry. She's been trained since childhood to sit quietly, speak only when addressed, and project an image of modest fertility that will appeal to her future husband's family. But here's what's particularly disturbing about elite Roman courtship. Claudia has no more choice in this arrangement than you do, and considerably less power to influence the outcome. While you'll eventually inherit political authority and economic independence, she's being transferred from her father's control to your control, like a particularly valuable piece of property. The conversations you're allowed to have during supervised courtship focus on topics that reveal nothing about personality, interests, or compatibility. You might discuss her needlework skills, her knowledge of household management, or her demonstrated piety toward household gods. Her intelligence, if she possesses any, must be carefully hidden because intellectual women are considered threatening to male authority. Now let's crash back to middle-class reality with Gaius, whose romantic prospects are about to demonstrate that even modest wealth creates opportunities that slaves can never access. Your future marriage will still be arranged by your parents, but with more practical considerations and fewer political implications. Your father is currently negotiating with other merchant families to find a bride whose dowry will strengthen your family's fish-selling business while providing you with a wife trained in the domestic skills necessary for managing a household. Love might develop after marriage, but it's not a requirement for the arrangement to succeed. The girl you'll marry, let's call her Julia, is probably 14 or 15, closer to your age, but still young enough that her character can be shaped by marriage. Her family owns a small bakery, which means the union will create business opportunities for both families while ensuring that your children inherit connections in multiple trades. The courtship process for middle-class Romans involves more practical considerations and less formal ceremony. You might actually work alongside Julia's family before marriage, learning whether you can cooperate effectively in business while evaluating her domestic capabilities. The sensory experience includes the smell of bread from her family's ovens, the sound of customers conducting daily business, and the sight of Julia managing household tasks with competence that will benefit your future together. But even middle-class courtship reinforces gender hierarchies that make modern relationship dynamics look egalitarian. Julia's education has focused entirely on domestic skills: cooking, cleaning, child-rearing, and household management. She can probably read basic Latin, but her intellectual development stopped there because women's minds are considered too weak for serious learning. The physical aspects of middle-class courtship are carefully supervised to prevent inappropriate contact before marriage. You might hold hands briefly during formal introductions, but any more intimate contact is forbidden until wedding ceremonies make such interactions legally and socially acceptable. And then there's slave Titus, whose romantic life exists entirely at the mercy of his master's preferences and economic interests. Slaves can't legally marry because marriage is a contract between free citizens, but they can form relationships that their masters might recognize or destroy depending on what serves the household's interests. If you're allowed to form a romantic attachment with another slave, let's call her Livia, the relationship exists only as long as it doesn't interfere with your labor or your master's plans. Slave relationships can be terminated instantly if one partner is sold, freed, or assigned to duties that require separation. The sensory experience of slave romance involves constant fear and uncertainty. Stolen moments of conversation in corridors, brief touches while working, whispered promises that both of you know might be impossible to keep. Physical intimacy happens when and where you can find privacy, always with the knowledge that discovery could result in punishment, separation, or worse. But here's what's particularly cruel about slave relationships. If you and Livia have children, those children belong to your master, not to you. Your reproductive capacity is property to be exploited for your owner's benefit. Your children might be sold away from you at any age, for any reason, without consideration for parental feelings or family bonds. The wedding ceremonies that transform courtship into marriage reflect the same social hierarchies that define everything else in Roman life. Elite weddings are elaborate productions designed to demonstrate family wealth and social status, while ensuring that everyone understands the political implications of a union. Marcus's wedding to Claudia begins with religious ceremonies at dawn, continues with public processions through Rome's most prestigious neighborhoods, and concludes with banquets that cost more than most Romans see in lifetimes. The sensory assault includes the sound of professional musicians, the sight of elaborate decorations, the smell of expensive incense and exotic foods, and the taste of wines imported from the empire's finest vineyards. The wedding dress itself is a work of art. Hand-woven fabric dyed in expensive colors, jewelry that represents a substantial portion of a dowry, and a flame-colored veil that symbolizes the bride's transition from maiden to wife. The visual impact is designed to overwhelm spectators with evidence of family wealth and social position. But even in the midst of celebration, the ceremony includes disturbing elements that reveal the true nature of Roman marriage. The bride is literally transferred from her father's authority to her husband's authority through legal formulas that treat her as property, changing ownership. She loses her family name and adopts her husband's, symbolically dying to her birth family and being reborn into her husband's household. Middle-class weddings like Gaius and Julia's include the same religious and legal elements, but with less elaborate display. The ceremonies still involve ritual transfer of authority, religious sacrifices to ensure divine approval, and community witnesses to make the union socially recognized. But the celebrations are scaled to family resources. Local wine instead of imported delicacies, simple decorations instead of professional displays, neighborhood guests instead of political dignitaries. The sensory experience of middle-class weddings emphasizes community participation over luxury display. The smell of roasting meat from animals the families could barely afford to sacrifice, the sound of neighbors singing traditional songs, the sight of modest decorations that represent genuine sacrifice rather than casual expense. Slave relationships that receive master approval might be recognized through informal ceremonies that mimic marriage without legal status. Titus and Livia might exchange simple vows in the presence of other household slaves, creating social bonds that lack legal protection but provide emotional support within the constraints of their enslaved condition. But let's talk about what happens after the wedding ceremonies conclude and the real business of Roman marriage begins. For newly married women, the transition from girl to wife involves immediate and dramatic changes that modern women would find traumatic. Claudia, barely 13 and married to 16-year-old Marcus, is expected to begin producing children immediately. Roman medicine understands nothing about adolescent development, reproductive health, or the physical dangers of early pregnancy. She's considered ready for motherhood the moment she menstruates, regardless of her emotional or physical maturity. The sensory experience of early marriage for Roman girls includes pain that no one acknowledges as abnormal, fears that no one addresses as legitimate, and responsibilities that no one questions as age-appropriate. The wedding night involves sexual experiences for which she's received no preparation beyond vague warnings about wifely duty and divine expectations for female submission. Pregnancy, when it comes, and it usually comes quickly, brings health risks that make modern maternal mortality statistics look optimistic. Roman women give birth without anesthesia, without sterile instruments, without understanding of infection control, and without access to emergency medical intervention when complications arise. The psychological impact of early marriage and pregnancy shapes Roman women's entire adult experience. Claudia will spend her teenage years bearing children, nursing infants, managing households, and learning to navigate the complex social obligations of elite Roman wives. Her education continues after marriage, but it focuses on practical skills from managing servants, hosting political dinners, and raising sons who will inherit their father's status. For middle-class wives like Julia, marriage brings similar reproductive expectations with fewer resources for managing the physical and emotional demands. She'll bear children while also working in the family business, managing domestic responsibilities without slave assistance, and providing the practical support that keeps merchant families economically viable. The daily reality of Roman marriage involves constant pregnancy, frequent miscarriages, high infant mortality, and the ever-present possibility of maternal death. Women who survive multiple pregnancies are considered fortunate. Those who produce healthy male heirs are considered blessed by the gods. But here's what makes Roman attitudes toward love and marriage particularly complex. Despite the arranged nature of most unions, some couples do develop genuine affection. Marcus and Claudia might discover that they enjoy each other's company, share similar interests, or find physical compatibility that transforms duty into pleasure. The letters and tomb inscriptions that survive from ancient Rome include evidence of married couples who clearly loved each other deeply, who mourned sincerely when separated by death, who found joy in relationships that began as business arrangements. Roman marriage might not start with love, but it doesn't preclude love developing over time. However, Roman society also accepts that married men will seek sexual satisfaction outside marriage through relationships with slaves, prostitutes, or other men's wives. Adultery laws apply only to married women. Husbands can be unfaithful without legal or social consequences as long as they don't interfere with other men's property rights. The double standard creates a sexual culture where married women must remain faithful while their husbands enjoy extensive sexual freedom. A wife's adultery is grounds for divorce, financial ruin, and social disgrace. A husband's affairs are considered normal male behavior that doesn't reflect on his character or his marriage. As evening settles over Rome and newly married couples settle into their domestic routines, the reality of Roman marriage reveals itself in the daily negotiations between duty and desire, arrangement and affection, social expectation, and personal happiness. Young wives like Claudia and Julia are falling asleep next to husbands they barely know in households they're still learning to manage, carrying the weight of family expectations and social obligations that will define the rest of their lives. Their teenage years are ending before they've truly begun, replaced by adult responsibilities that would challenge much older women. Their husbands are learning to balance the authority they've been granted over wives and households with the practical realities of sharing space, resources, and decisions with partners they're still getting to know. The romantic love that modern people consider essential to marriage might develop over time, but it's not required for Roman marriages to function successfully. And slaves like Titus and Livia are creating whatever emotional connections they can within systems designed to deny their humanity, finding love and companionship despite legal structures that treat their relationships as temporary conveniences subject to their master's whims. Roman marriage isn't about happiness or personal fulfillment. It's about creating stable households that produce the next generation of Roman citizens while strengthening family alliances and maintaining social order. Love, when it occurs, is a fortunate accident rather than the foundation of the relationship. But as you're about to discover, even Roman marriage is just preparation for the real challenge of adult Roman life, surviving long enough to reproduce the system that created you. So you've survived Roman courtship, marriage negotiations, and the delightful realization that your romantic future was decided by people who view love as a dangerous distraction from proper family alliances. Your teenage body is either adjusting to married life while your brain struggles to process adult responsibilities, or you're contemplating a future where emotional connections will always be secondary to economic considerations. But here's the thing about Roman society. Even evening leisure time is designed to remind you exactly where you belong in the cosmic order of things. Welcome to Roman Nightfall, where the setting sun doesn't signal rest and relaxation. It triggers a complete transformation of urban life that makes modern nightlife look like a peaceful meditation retreat. Because in ancient Rome, darkness doesn't just hide activities. It reveals the true nature of Roman civilization in ways that daylight carefully conceals. As shadows lengthen across marble forums and narrow alleyways, Rome becomes a different city entirely. The orderly daytime hierarchy of togas and social protocols gives way to something more primal, more dangerous, and infinitely more revealing about what Romans actually value when they think no one important is watching. Let's start with our wealthy Marcus, whose evening activities are about to demonstrate that even leisure time requires enormous resources and careful social positioning. As sunset approaches, you're not wondering what to do with your free time. You're preparing for the evening's main event, the cena, the primary meal of the Roman day that doubles as political theater and social performance art. Your family's triclinium has been transformed by slaves into a stage set designed to overwhelm guests with evidence of your wealth and sophistication. The air is thick with the scent of expensive incense, frankincense from Arabia, myrrh from Africa, nard from India, creating an olfactory map of Rome's global dominance. Oil lamps burning the finest olive oil cast dancing shadows on frescoed walls depicting scenes from mythology that only educated people can properly interpret. The dining couches themselves are works of art, wooden frames inlaid with ivory and precious metals, cushioned with silk-stuffed pillows, draped with fabrics that cost more than most Romans earn in years. You're not sitting at dinner. You're reclining in a position that announces your freedom from physical labor, your leisure to spend hours over meals, your distance from the practical concerns that dominate plebeian life. But here's where elite Roman dining gets really interesting. The meal itself is less about nutrition and more about demonstrating your family's ability to command resources from across the known world. The gustatio, the appetizer course, might include oysters from Britain, dates from North Africa, or cheese aged in caves specifically chosen for their effect on flavor. Each dish announces Rome's imperial reach while reminding guests of your family's position within that empire. The sensory assault is carefully orchestrated to overwhelm. Peacock roasted with exotic spices that fill the room with complex aromas, wine mixed with honey and herbs that creates flavors unknown to ordinary Romans, and presentation that treats food as visual art designed to impress as much as nourish. The conversation during these dinners reveals the true purpose of elite evening entertainment: political networking disguised as social pleasure. Guests discuss land purchases in Gaul, business opportunities in Egypt, marriage alliances that might strengthen family positions, and the latest gossip about who's rising or falling in imperial favor. You're learning statecraft through dinner party conversations that sound casual but determine the fate of provinces. The entertainment between courses includes professional musicians playing instruments imported from Greece, poets reciting verses commissioned specifically for your family's events, and dancers whose performances combine artistic skill with subtle eroticism that pushes boundaries without crossing into scandal. But the most important entertainment is the conversation itself, the carefully modulated discussions that allow guests to signal alliances, test loyalties, and negotiate deals while maintaining the pretense of casual social interaction. Your teenage ears are absorbing lessons in power that no formal education could provide. Now let's crash back to reality with middle-class Gaius, whose evening meal is about to demonstrate that even modest prosperity creates opportunities for social connection and family bonding, albeit without the imperial-scale resources that make elite dining a form of political theater. Your family cena takes place in the same room where you conduct business during the day, with wooden furniture that's functional rather than artistic and food that's satisfying rather than exotic. The sensory experience is simpler but no less meaningful. The smell of bread baked in your own ovens, the taste of wine from local vineyards, the sound of family conversation that doesn't require political calculation. The meal begins with prayers to household gods, but the religious observance feels more genuine and less performed than elite ceremonies. Your father pours wine onto the floor as an offering while speaking prayers that connect your family to Roman tradition without the self-conscious display that characterizes patrician religious practice. The food itself reflects your family's position in Roman society. Good bread made from wheat rather than cheaper grains, olive oil that's fresh and flavorful, wine that's been properly aged, and occasionally meat from animals your family could afford to sacrifice for special occasions. The portions are generous without being wasteful, the flavors are satisfying without being exotic, and the presentation is practical rather than artistic. But here's what makes middle-class Roman dining particularly interesting. The conversation includes genuine discussion of daily concerns rather than political maneuvering. Your family talks about business prospects, neighborhood gossip, religious obligations, and practical decisions that affect your immediate welfare. The evening meal becomes a forum for family decision-making and emotional connection rather than strategic networking. The entertainment is simpler, but often more authentic. Family members sharing stories, singing traditional songs, or playing simple games that don't require expensive equipment or professional performers. Your younger siblings might demonstrate new skills they've learned. Your mother might share news from the local markets, and your father might discuss business decisions that affect the entire family's welfare. And then there's slave Titus, whose evening meal can be described more accurately as whatever nutrition your master deems necessary to maintain your productivity. You're not dining, you're refueling, and only after your masters and their guests have been completely satisfied. Your food consists of whatever remains after free Romans have eaten: bread that's gone stale, porridge made from the cheapest grains available, and occasionally scraps of meat from animals slaughtered for more important people's meals. The sensory experience is dominated by hunger, fatigue, and the constant awareness that your sustenance depends entirely on other people's generosity or indifference. You eat quickly, efficiently, without the leisure to savor flavors or enjoy social conversation. Meals happen when time permits, in whatever space is available, often while standing or crouching, because comfortable seating is for people with rights. The taste of your food is secondary to its availability. You're grateful for nutrition regardless of quality, because alternative options don't exist. But slave evening activities include their own forms of community and resistance that free Romans barely acknowledge. In slave quarters, after the day's labor is complete, you might share stories, songs, or traditions from your homeland. These gatherings create emotional connections and cultural continuity that help preserve identity despite systematic dehumanization. The psychological impact of slave community activities provides crucial support for surviving conditions designed to break human spirit. Shared experiences, mutual assistance, and collective memory help maintain sanity and dignity in circumstances that deny both. As full darkness settles over Rome, the city transforms in ways that reveal aspects of Roman civilization carefully hidden during daylight hours. The narrow streets that seem crowded during the day become genuinely dangerous after sunset, when inadequate lighting creates perfect conditions for crime, accident, and worse. Roman street lighting consists mainly of oil lamps placed sporadically throughout the city, creating pools of flickering illumination separated by stretches of genuine darkness. The sensory experience of walking through Rome after dark includes the scent of burning olive oil, the sound of footsteps echoing off stone walls, and the constant visual adjustment between light and shadow that makes navigation treacherous. The sounds of nighttime Rome are unlike anything modern urban dwellers experience. No electric lighting means no constant background hum of modern technology. Instead, you hear human voices carrying conversations across narrow alleyways, the clip of hooves as late travelers make their way through streets, the occasional crash of pottery, or worse, when someone miscalculates their footing in the darkness. But Roman nights also include activities that daylight social conventions prohibit or discourage. Taverns become gathering places where social mixing occurs across class boundaries that remain rigid during daylight hours. The smell of wine, roasted meat, and human sweat creates an atmosphere that's simultaneously welcoming and dangerous. These taverns serve wine strong enough to make water seem unnecessary, food that's designed more for sustenance than sophistication, and entertainment that ranges from gambling games to prostitution to political discussions that might be treasonous if conducted in daylight settings. The clientele includes everyone from off-duty soldiers to traveling merchants to slaves who've been granted evening freedom by indulgent masters. Social hierarchies still exist, but they're more fluid, more negotiable, and more likely to be challenged by alcohol and darkness. For wealthy Romans like Marcus, nighttime activities might include more private entertainments that take advantage of darkness to explore behaviors considered inappropriate during daylight hours. Elite dinner parties can extend well into the night with activities that push social boundaries while maintaining plausible deniability about what actually occurred. The psychological freedom that darkness provides allows Romans to experiment with behaviors, relationships, and activities that daylight social conventions prohibit. Sexual encounters that cross class boundaries, political discussions that challenge official policies, and social interactions that violate normal hierarchy all become possible under cover of darkness. But Roman nights also bring genuine dangers that make modern urban crime look like minor inconveniences. Street robberies are common because inadequate lighting creates perfect conditions for ambush. Building collapses increase at night when structural problems are harder to detect and avoid. Fire spreads rapidly through wooden structures while residents sleep, creating conflagrations that could destroy entire neighborhoods. The Watch, Rome's primitive police force, consists mainly of freed slaves and urban poor who lack the training, equipment, or motivation to provide effective protection. They're more likely to participate in crime than prevent it, especially when victims are unlikely to have political connections that might make punishment probable. For women, nighttime movement through Roman streets is particularly dangerous. Sexual assault is common and rarely prosecuted, especially when victims are slaves or lower-class free women. Even wealthy women require substantial security escorts for nighttime travel, and many simply avoid leaving their homes after dark. The sensory experience of dangerous Roman nights includes the hypervigilance that comes from knowing that help is unlikely and violence is probable. Every shadow might conceal threats. Every sound might indicate approaching danger. Every interaction might escalate into life-threatening conflict. As the evening progresses and Romans begin preparing for sleep, The bedtime routines reflect the same social hierarchies that define every other aspect of daily life. Wealthy families retire to private chambers with comfortable beds, warm blankets, and slave attendants available throughout the night for any needs that might arise. The transition from evening activities to sleep includes religious observances that bookend the day with acknowledgement of divine authority. Evening prayers to household gods, offerings of food and wine, and requests for protection during vulnerable sleeping hours connect daily life to cosmic order. Middle-class families share sleeping spaces that provide comfort without luxury, warmth without excess, and security without professional protection. Their evening routines include practical preparation for the next day's work, family discussions about upcoming obligations, and simple religious observances that connect them to Roman tradition. Slaves sleep wherever space permits, often in conditions that prioritize master's convenience over servant comfort. Bedtime routines are minimal because slave rest is considered less important than slave availability for emergency duties throughout the night. The psychological impact of Roman bedtime routines includes processing the day's experiences within social frameworks that make individual concerns secondary to community obligations and family loyalty. Your teenage brain falls asleep while navigating complex social expectations, personal desires, and practical necessities that modern adolescents rarely face. As oil lamps flicker and die throughout the city, Rome settles into nighttime rhythms that reveal the civilization's true character. Sophisticated and brutal, orderly and chaotic, magnificent and terrifying. The darkness doesn't just end the day. It transforms Roman society into something more honest about its essential nature. Your teenage consciousness drifts toward sleep while surrounded by household gods, family obligations, and social hierarchies that will determine every aspect of tomorrow's experience. The sensory memories of evening meals, social interactions, and nighttime activities blend into dreams that process the complex realities of Roman civilization. But even sleep in ancient Rome comes with its own particular forms of vulnerability and social significance that separate it from modern rest. Sweet dreams, young Roman. Try not to let the bedbugs carry you away. So there you are, drifting off to sleep in whatever accommodations your Roman birth lottery has provided, silk-draped luxury, modest family quarters, or whatever corner your master has deemed adequate for storing human property. Your teenage brain is processing a day that included religious obligations, social hierarchies, brutal entertainment, and evening activities that revealed more about Roman civilization than any daytime performance could manage. But here's the thing about Roman life that would completely blow modern minds. Everything we've just experienced represents just one possible version of Roman teenage existence. Because here's what Hollywood never tells you about ancient Rome. The empire was massive, diverse, and constantly changing in ways that made being a Roman teenager in Britain completely different from teenage life in Egypt, which was totally unlike growing up in Spain, which bore no resemblance to adolescence in Syria. Add seasonal variations that modern climate control has made us forget, and you realize that Roman teenage life isn't one experience. It's thousands of different experiences happening simultaneously across an empire that stretched from Scotland to Sudan. Welcome to the mind-bending reality of Roman diversity, where your daily experience as a teenager depended not just on social class, but on whether you lived through blazing African summers or freezing Germanic winters, whether you grew up speaking Latin, Greek, Celtic, or Aramaic, and whether your local teenage traditions involved Mediterranean festivals or adapted barbarian customs that would make city Romans faint with horror. Let's start with the seasonal changes that shaped Roman life in ways that would make modern people realize how completely divorced we've become from natural rhythms. If you think Roman winters were just slightly cooler versions of Roman summers, you're about to discover that surviving seasonal changes without modern technology was basically an annual exercise in not dying from weather-related complications. Winter in Rome itself, the heart of the empire, transforms your teenage experience into something that makes modern cold weather complaints look like minor inconveniences. The temperature drops to levels that make your breath visible and your bones ache with cold that penetrates woolen clothing and settles into your skeleton like it plans to stay until spring. The sensory experience of Roman winter begins with the complete transformation of familiar spaces. Your home, which seemed reasonably comfortable during warmer months, becomes a battle zone against cold that seeps through stone walls and wooden shutters like an invading army. The air inside carries the permanent scent of charcoal smoke from braziers that provide heat while simultaneously filling rooms with fumes that make your eyes water and your throat burn. If you're wealthy, Marcus, winter means retreating to rooms that can be heated effectively while accepting that even luxury has limits when facing Mediterranean winter weather. Your morning routine now includes waiting for slaves to light fires in warm rooms before you emerge from beneath wool blankets that feel heavier than summer togas. The marble floors that seemed elegantly cool during summer now conduct cold that makes walking barefoot genuinely painful. But if you're middle-class Gaius or slave Titus, Roman winter becomes a survival challenge that tests your body's limits in ways that modern heating systems have made unimaginable. Your living spaces lack effective heating, your clothing provides minimal insulation, and your daily activities must continue regardless of weather conditions that make basic tasks dramatically more difficult. The work of winter includes challenges that don't exist during warmer months. Hauling water from public fountains when ice forms around the edges, maintaining fires that require constant attention and expensive fuel, and performing outdoor labor when wind cuts through clothing like it's actively trying to freeze your internal organs. But Roman winter also brings its own unique pleasures and traditions that connect teenagers to seasonal cycles in ways that modern life rarely permits. Saturnalia transforms the cold, dark months into a celebration that makes modern holidays look restrained. The contrast between winter hardship and festival abundance creates appreciation for luxury that warmer months can't match. The sensory experience of Saturnalia during winter includes the warmth of crowded rooms filled with celebrating people, the taste of special foods that families save for annual celebrations, and the psychological relief of temporary social reversals that make winter's social constraints bearable. Now imagine being a Roman teenager in Britain, where winter means something completely different and infinitely more brutal. You're dealing with weather that makes Roman winter look like spring vacation. Snow that accumulates instead of melting immediately, frost that kills crops and makes outdoor work genuinely dangerous, and cold that penetrates Roman construction techniques designed for Mediterranean climates. British Roman teenagers adapt to winter conditions that require completely different survival strategies. Your clothing includes furs and heavy woolens unknown in Rome. Your food preservation techniques rely on freezing temperatures that Mediterranean Romans never experience. Your daily activities follow rhythms determined by dramatically shortened daylight hours that make Roman winter seem tropical by comparison. The psychological impact of British Roman winter includes forms of seasonal depression that Mediterranean Romans couldn't comprehend. Months of gray skies, minimal sunlight, and weather that keeps people indoors for days at a time create mental health challenges that Roman medicine doesn't recognize or address. But British Roman teenagers also develop resilience and community bonds that warmer climates don't require. Surviving brutal winters creates cooperation and mutual dependence that strengthens social connections in ways that Mediterranean ease can't match. On the opposite extreme, imagine being a Roman teenager in Egypt, where seasonal changes mean the difference between life-giving Nile floods and deadly drought rather than temperature variations. Your year revolves around the river's annual cycle, which determines agricultural success, economic prosperity, and social stability in ways that have nothing to do with cold or heat. Egyptian Roman teenagers experience seasonal changes through flooding that transforms the landscape from desert to fertile farmland, creating abundance followed by scarcity in predictable annual cycles. The sensory experience includes the smell of rich river mud that enables agriculture, the sight of crops emerging from flood-enriched soil, and the taste of foods that depend entirely on successful flood seasons. But Egyptian seasons also include challenges that other Roman provinces don't face. Sandstorms that make breathing difficult and visibility impossible, heat that makes Roman summer look comfortable, and flood failures that create famine conditions affecting entire populations. The religious calendar in Egypt adapts Roman festivals to local conditions while maintaining traditional observances that predate Roman conquest by thousands of years. Egyptian Roman teenagers participate in celebrations that blend Roman traditions with pharaonic customs, creating hybrid cultural experiences that exist nowhere else in the empire. Regional differences extend far beyond seasonal variations to include cultural adaptations that make Roman civilization incredibly diverse despite its unified political structure. A Roman teenager in Gaul grows up speaking Celtic languages alongside Latin, participating in Druidic traditions alongside Roman religious observances, and eating foods that combine Mediterranean influences with local agricultural products. The daily experience of Gallic Roman teenagers includes hunting and gathering activities unknown to urban Romans, seasonal migrations that follow animal herds or agricultural opportunities, and community festivals that celebrate local gods alongside official Roman deities. Spanish Roman teenagers live in regions where Phoenician, Celtic, and Roman cultures blend to create unique local traditions. Their daily lives include mining activities that extract silver and other metals essential to Roman economy, agricultural techniques adapted to Iberian climate conditions, and social customs that reflect centuries of cultural mixing. But perhaps the most dramatic regional variation exists in the eastern provinces, where Greek culture maintains its prestige and influence despite Roman political control. A Roman teenager in Athens or Alexandria grows up in cities where Greek remains the language of education and culture, where philosophical traditions predate Roman civilization, and where local customs often take precedence over Roman social conventions. Eastern Roman teenagers might receive educations that emphasize Greek literature and philosophy over Latin traditions, participate in religious observances that blend Roman gods with local deities, and navigate social hierarchies that reflect Greek rather than Roman values. The sensory experience of Eastern Roman teenage life includes the sound of multiple languages in daily conversation, the taste of foods that combine Roman and local culinary traditions, and the sight of architecture that blends Roman engineering with local aesthetic preferences. Urban versus rural differences create additional variations that affect teenage experiences across all regions. Rural Roman teenagers, regardless of province, share certain experiences: agricultural work that follows seasonal cycles, closer connections to natural rhythms, and community structures that emphasize extended family and tribal loyalties over urban social hierarchies. Rural teenagers develop physical capabilities and practical skills that urban Romans lack. Animal husbandry, crop cultivation, weather prediction, and survival techniques that make them more self-sufficient but less sophisticated in urban social navigation. Urban teenagers across the empire share different experiences: exposure to diverse populations, access to formal education and entertainment, participation in commercial activities, and navigation of complex social hierarchies that rural communities don't require. But urban Roman teenagers also face challenges that rural areas avoid: higher crime rates, disease transmission in crowded conditions, food security that depends on complex supply chains, and social competition that can be psychologically devastating. The historical period also significantly affects teenage experiences in ways that make early Roman Republic adolescence completely different from late imperial teenage life. Political upheavals, economic changes, military campaigns, and social reforms create generational experiences that shape entire cohorts of Roman teenagers. Early imperial teenagers, like our characters, grow up during Rome's golden age, when military expansion creates economic opportunities and political stability enables cultural development. But teenagers during later periods face barbarian invasions, economic decline, religious changes, and political chaos that create completely different challenges and opportunities. The psychological impact of living during historical transitions affects how teenagers understand their place in society and their prospects for the future. Teenagers during Rome's expansion develop confidence and ambition that reflect imperial success. Teenagers during decline develop survival skills and adaptability that reflect imperial stress. Religious changes particularly affect teenage experiences as Christianity gradually replaces traditional Roman polytheism. Christian Roman teenagers navigate completely different moral frameworks, participate in radically different religious observances, and prepare for adult lives that emphasize different values and priorities. The sensory experience of Christian Roman teenage life includes the sound of hymns rather than traditional chants, the sight of churches rather than temples, and the taste of communion rather than sacrificial meals. As our day-long journey through Roman teenage life concludes, the overwhelming reality becomes clear. There is no single Roman teenage experience, any more than there's a single modern teenage experience. The empire's vast size, cultural diversity, climatic variations, and historical changes created thousands of different ways to grow up Roman. But certain elements connected all Roman teenagers regardless of time, place, or circumstances. The hierarchy that determined opportunities based on birth, the religious obligations that structured daily life, the family expectations that shaped personal choices, and the imperial identity that provided common cultural reference points. Whether you woke up in British fog, Egyptian heat, Spanish mountains, or Gallic forests, whether you lived during Republican expansion or imperial decline, whether you spoke Latin, Greek, or local languages, you shared the experience of growing up in a civilization that valued order, hierarchy, tradition, and power above individual happiness or personal fulfillment. Your teenage years prepared you not for self-discovery or personal growth, but for accepting your assigned role in maintaining Roman civilization. The daily experiences we've explored, from morning religious observances to evening family meals, all serve the same purpose: creating adults who would perpetuate the system that created them. And here's the most Roman thing of all: it worked. For over 1,000 years, Roman civilization survived and thrived because teenagers like Marcus, Gaius, and Titus learned to accept their places in society, fulfill their assigned roles, and pass Roman values to the next generation. The sensory memories of your Roman teenage day: the smell of incense and fish sauce, the sound of street vendors and gladiatorial crowds, the taste of honeyed wine and coarse bread, the feel of silk togas and rough tunics. Fade into sleep that prepares you for tomorrow's repetition of the same social hierarchies, religious obligations, and imperial expectations. You've survived one day as a Roman teenager in a civilization that conquered the Mediterranean world through the accumulated efforts of millions of people who learned, like you, to prioritize duty over desire, tradition over innovation, and social stability over personal happiness. Sweet dreams, young Roman. Tomorrow brings another day of maintaining the empire that shaped you, serving the gods who claimed you, and accepting the fate that birth assigned you. Welcome to ancient Rome. Thanks for not dying before bedtime.